Doctors have been saying the same thing for 40 years. If you're over 65 and you want a longer life, cut your carbs and live on fat. That's still the standard position. But a peer-reviewed study published in May of 2026 in the journal Aging Cell shows something that quietly contradicts almost every word of that advice. Right now, older adults in Sydney who did the opposite of keto measurably pulled their biological clock backward, not slowly, in 4 weeks. And what they ate is not what your nutritionist is going to recommend. Stay with me, because I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, why it works, and what to eat starting at your very next meal. I'm Dr. Richard James. I've spent more than 3 decades in clinical practice, focused on senior health, and what I'm about to walk you through could change what you eat for breakfast tomorrow morning. Before we get into the study, I need you to understand something about your body after 65 that changes this entire conversation. The flexibility your liver had at 35 to switch cleanly between burning carbs and burning fat is, on average, sharply reduced. Your aging neurons are not metabolic generalists. They are glucose specialists. When you force them onto ketones, some adapt, many quietly underperform. That is a measurable loss of energy in the precise organ you are trying to protect. This is the part most doctors do not sit down and explain. But once you understand this one thing, everything else I am about to share clicks into place. The biological aging that happens in the wrong macronutrient environment is not easily clawed back. Your doctor probably never explained that part either. The study I am referring to followed older adults for 4 weeks on a specific dietary protocol. It came out of the University of Sydney, published in May of 2026 in the journal Aging Cell. And what their epigenetic clocks showed at the end of those 4 weeks is what I want every viewer over 65 to hear, in plain language, before another month goes by. But the study alone is not the point. The point is the mechanism. Because once you understand what your cells are actually doing on this diet versus on keto, you cannot unsee it. That mechanism is what I will explain in detail in just a few minutes. Let me start with what went wrong. The keto craze did not stop at gym goers. It got marketed straight at adults over 65 as the longevity diet, the brain-protecting diet, the diet that would reverse what aging had done. Many of you tried it. Some of you stayed on it for years. And some of you noticed something the marketing never warned you about. Your energy crashed. Your sleep got lighter. You lost weight, yes, but the wrong kind. Your grip got weaker. The stairs got harder. I have seen this in clinic again and again. A patient walks in, proud of how much weight they have dropped on strict keto, and we run a body composition scan. The fat came off. The muscle came off too. After 65, muscle is the currency that buys you your independence. In the published research that actually included adults over 65, not the 30-somethings on social media, the keto-style groups consistently lost lean mass at rates that, sustained over a decade, would shift a healthy 65-year-old into measurable frailty. That is not what longevity looks like. That is what nursing home admissions look like. The literature on protein metabolism in older adults is clear on this. The studies on sarcopenia, the medical word for age-related muscle loss, are clear on this. Your body after 65 needs adequate carbohydrate and adequate protein to hold on to the muscle that holds you upright. The picture gets worse from there. Strict ketogenic eating in older bodies tends to push the kidneys harder. It tends to disturb sleep architecture because the brain prefers glucose during the deep stages. It tends to elevate certain stress hormones in people who are already running high. None of these are catastrophic on day 30. All of them accumulate quietly over months and years. By the time a patient comes back to me at year 2 of keto, the lab work is telling a story the patient cannot yet feel. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You felt amazing on keto. I believe you. Short-term ketosis can feel sharp. The mental clarity in week 1 can be real. But what feels sharp at week 1 is not always what serves you at year 5. The biological age data is what should decide this question, not the first week feeling. Why does your nutritionist not bring this up? Because the marketing got loud, the research on older adults stayed quiet, and the standard talking points were written for a younger body. That is not a conspiracy, it is a gap. That gap is the reason you are here. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because if keto was the wrong answer for older adults, then what the Sydney research team found was an answer almost nobody saw coming. The Sydney protocol was not low-carb. It was not low-fat. It was a specific carbohydrate-forward pattern. The foods at the center of it are the foods most over 65 viewers grew up eating, decades before the keto era ever existed. Oats, lentils, sweet potatoes, whole fruit servings spaced through the day, legumes at lunch, a modest, well-timed protein anchor at each meal, olive oil, not butter, as the primary fat. That was the platform. That is what reversed biological age in 4 weeks. The study was published in May of 2026 in the journal Aging Cell, out of the University of Sydney's Charles Perkins Center. It enrolled older adults, men and women in their late 60s and 70s. It ran for 28 days. What it measured was not weight. It was not cholesterol. It was something much harder to fake. It measured biological age using DNA methylation patterns, what scientists call an epigenetic clock. Here's what an epigenetic clock actually does. As you age, chemical tags called methyl groups attach to your DNA in patterns that change in predictable ways. Researchers read those patterns and convert them into a number, your biological age, which can run faster or slower than the number on your driver's license. It is one of the most validated markers of aging available in 2026. Pharmaceutical companies are spending tens of millions trying to move that needle by even a fraction of a year. The Sydney protocol moved it backward, measurably, in 4 weeks, in people in their late 60s and 70s. The participants did not just slow their aging on paper, they reversed it on paper. Most pharmaceutical interventions cannot show that. Let me put the food list back in front of you, because this is where the value lives. Breakfast was slow-cooked oats with whole fruit, berries, an apple, or a banana, depending on the day. Lunch was a serving of legumes, lentils, chickpeas, or kidney beans, paired with a half cup of whole grain like brown rice or barley, and a generous plate of leafy greens dressed with olive oil. Snacks were fruit and a small handful of nuts. Dinner was a modest portion of fish or poultry, a starch from the whole food side, a baked sweet potato, wild rice, or roasted squash, and roasted vegetables. Olive oil was the cooking and finishing fat, water with each meal. There was no calorie counting. There was no fasting window. There was no exotic supplement. There was no expensive specialty product. The total carbohydrate intake landed in a range that most keto advocates would call high. The fiber intake landed in a range that most modern American diets do not even approach. Notice what is not on that list. There is no white bread. There is no breakfast cereal in a brightly colored box. There is no soda. There is no fruit juice. There is no candy. There are no chips. There is no pastry. The pattern is high in carbohydrates, but the carbohydrates are coming from foods your great-grandmother would have recognized as food. That distinction is the entire game, and most of the keto versus carb debate misses it completely. The biological age reading at the end of the 28 days did not show a flat line. It showed a measurable backward shift in epigenetic age, in adults who, on average, had already lived more than 2/3 of a typical lifespan, in 4 weeks, with food you can buy at any grocery store in America for less than the cost of a single keto-branded protein bar per day. So here is exactly what I want you to do, and I'm going to walk you through the full protocol in a moment. First, I need to explain why this works at the cellular level, because if you don't understand the mechanism, you will quit on day 5 when the cravings hit. And I need this to actually stick for you. Here is what is actually happening inside the cells of the Sydney participants in those 28 days. First, the aging brain. Your aging neurons are glucose specialists. They are designed, after roughly 6 decades of operation, to run optimally on a steady, modest stream of glucose, not on the high-fat ketone bath that keto produces. When the Sydney participants ate slow-cooked oats in the morning, what their brain received was a stable, fiber-buffered glucose curve, not a sugar spike, not a ketone substitute, but the fuel the brain was built around. The result was steadier mental energy, steadier mood, and on the biomarker side, less of the chronic stress signaling that ages the brain. Second, the gut. The fiber in oats, lentils, and sweet potatoes is fermented by your gut bacteria. That fermentation releases short-chain fatty acids, small molecules called butyrate, propionate, and acetate that travel through your bloodstream and reach the cells lining your blood vessels, your liver, and even your brain. Those short-chain fatty acids influence the precise methylation patterns that the epigenetic clock reads. You are not just feeding yourself, you are feeding the trillions of microbes that, in turn, are tuning your aging signal. Keto starves those microbes. The Sydney Protocol fed them luxuriously. Third, the muscles. The modest protein anchor at each meal, around 25 to 30 grams from fish, poultry, legumes, or eggs, hit what aging muscle physiology calls the muscle protein synthesis threshold without overloading the kidneys. That is the dose the muscle needs to keep building, not more. Spread across the day, at each meal, that protein pattern preserved lean mass while keto-style patterns were burning through it. Fourth, the inflammation curve. Olive oil as the primary fat, instead of butter and bacon fat, shifted the participants' omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in a direction that lowers chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is one of the strongest known drivers of biological aging. Lowering it, even modestly, over 4 weeks, shows up on the methylation clock. Each pillar is small. Stacked together, in the same body, eating the same way for 28 days, they moved the clock backward. That is the mechanism. Let me put a face on this. I think of a patient I'll call Frank. Frank is 72, a retired civil engineer who lives outside Sacramento with his wife of 46 years. He had been white-knuckling strict keto for almost 2 years. He came in tired, frustrated, gaining weight in his midsection even on under 1,500 calorie days, and quietly worried about his memory. We walked him off keto and onto this Sydney pattern. 4 weeks in, his morning energy was steady through 11 a.m. for the first time he could remember. His sleep deepened. The scale barely moved, but his belt fit a notch looser. His wife told me he sounded like himself again on the phone. That is what biological age reversal feels like in a person, before the lab measures it. Frank is a composite. I describe him because there is one in every clinic. That is the pattern of person this study describes. This is the part that frustrates me the most as a doctor. The information has been there. The mechanism has been there. The food has been there. What was missing was a high-quality study with a hard endpoint that could not be argued with. The Sydney team gave us one. Let me give you the exact protocol I would walk a patient through tonight if they sat in front of me and said, "Doctor, I am 68. I have tried keto. It did not work. What now?" Now, I know what some of you are also thinking. Your doctor told you to cut your carbs because of your A1C, your triglycerides, or your blood pressure. Are you saying you should ignore them? No. I am not telling you to overrule your cardiologist or your primary care physician. If they told you to lower your carbs, they probably had a reason rooted in your specific labs. What I am telling you is that the word carbs is not one thing. A donut and a cup of slow-cooked oats are both technically carbs. They do almost nothing to your body in common. A glass of orange juice and a serving of lentils are both technically carbs. They land in completely different physiological places. The Sydney Protocol is not the donut category. It is the lentil category. The fiber-dense, low-glycemic, whole food category. That distinction is the entire conversation. If you have diagnosed type 2 diabetes or stage 3 or higher kidney disease, do not change your eating pattern unilaterally. Bring this study, by name, to your next appointment. Ask your doctor to look at it with you. Most physicians will work with you on this once they see the data. Let me be clear about what this study did and did not show. It showed biological age reversal in 4 weeks in a specific group of older adults. It did not test against every population. It did not run for a decade. The science is solid where it ran. Where it did not run, I am not going to oversell it. Here is the protocol, the exact one. Starting tomorrow morning, your first meal is slow-cooked oats with whole fruit and a small handful of walnuts. That is it. You do that for 1 week before you change anything else. Week 2, you replace your lunch. Lunch becomes a serving of lentils, chickpeas, or beans with a half cup of brown rice or barley and a plate of leafy greens dressed in olive oil. Hold breakfast the same. Week 3, you replace your dinner. Dinner becomes a modest baked sweet potato, wild rice, or roasted squash with 4 to 5 ounces of fish, poultry, or eggs, and roasted vegetables. Olive oil is your cooking fat. Hold breakfast and lunch the same. Week 4. You are on the full Sydney pattern. Every day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all following the template. Snacks are fruit and a small handful of nuts. Water with each meal. No calorie counting, no fasting window, no exotic supplement. Track 4 things, on paper, so you can see what is changing. Morning energy on a 1 to 10 scale. Sleep depth. Your belt notch. If you have a home glucose meter, your fasting glucose at week 0 and week 4. The numbers will tell you what your epigenetic clock is doing long before any lab reads it. 2 things to know going in. Days 3 through 6, you will probably feel a carbohydrate reintroduction wobble, some bloating, some shifts in appetite. Eat regular meals, drink water, and let your gut microbes catch up. They will. By week 2, most patients describe it as the most satisfying way they have eaten in years. That is the protocol. Specific, cheap, available at any grocery store, tested with a hard endpoint. You can start it at your very next breakfast. You spent decades being told that what was on your grandmother's table was making you sick. The Sydney lab just spent 4 weeks proving the opposite. Your body has been waiting for permission to eat this way again. Tonight, I am giving you the permission. Starting tomorrow, you have the plan. I'm Dr. Richard James. If this is the first time someone has told you the truth about carbohydrates after 65, you and I have more to talk about. Subscribe so you don't miss next week's video. I'm going deeper into the same Sydney dataset from a different angle. The gut microbiome finding the headlines missed entirely. It explains why this same protocol works even better when paired with one specific morning habit that most seniors are already doing wrong. If this video helped you see something nobody had explained before, send it to one person you care about who has been struggling on a low-carb diet. You might be the reason they get their energy back this month. Take care of yourself tonight. You have earned a kitchen that is actually working with your body, not against it. I'll see you in the next one.